All right, so I have been so busy talking about my daughter's encounter with the Ontario public healthcare system that I have not been doing my usual job of talking about contentious gender matters all the time. And I actually kind of like that because I don't want to be a one-trick pony who only knows how to talk about one thing. And I will be doing more videos and columns exploring Canada's broken healthcare system. But right now, I want to put that aside because Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, unveiled her proposed legislation for transgender matters. And I could do like 10 videos on this topic because there is so much to say. This policy covers child surgical transitions and child hormonal transitions, but it also covers child social transitions in school. It speaks to sex ed curriculum and parental opt-outs, and it also speaks to biological males participating in women's sports. And even at the speed that I talk, I could do an hour-long video on each one of those. So since the announcement, I've been contemplating how best I wanted to handle this topic, and then tonight I was invited to speak live at CBC Canada Tonight. I just got off the filming set and figured now would be as good of a time as any to share where I'm coming from on gender matters. But at the root of it, I am a moderate through and through, and my positions root in moderation. I try really hard to maintain that moderation, remembering that perspectives and experiences beyond my own are also part of the equation. See, I care about the rights and autonomy of transgender individuals to make the choices that are right for them and allow them to thrive. But I also care about the agency and stewardship that parents bestow upon their children, acting as the primary ideological steward in their lives. And I care about the complex web that we spin when competing rights and interests intersect between various groups of people. We can't just decide that one group is unilaterally prioritized over the other. And we can't just presume that because one group of people are most comfortable with a particular outcome, that is the outcome that is the most balanced way forward. And I honestly hope that these principles are not particularly controversial. Because if you have no consideration towards the dignity and well-being of transgender people whatsoever, then you've dehumanized a group of people, and that is not a good thing. But we also live in a pluralistic society, and that only operates when we respect the agency of individual families to live the life that reflects their own worldviews and beliefs. And sometimes a family's beliefs might involve a morality that says being gay or trans is not acceptable. To be intolerant of such intolerance is to take away the agency of belief. We live in a world with other people, where the opportunities and decisions we each make do affect others. It's not an adiabatic process, and this means that there's just so much nuance and complexity to unpack. It's not simple, and pretending that it's straightforward is what leads to one-sided solutions that don't even make an attempt to find balance. What I find most discouraging these days is that it's hard to come by individuals who actually, really and truly, wish to find balance between the rights and privileges of transgender individuals and a society that is fundamentally structured around gender. We see this in some LGBT activists who have quite forcefully pushed for the deconstruction of gender that everyone must adopt and call people bigots if they are not prepared to comply in every respect. That is not balanced. But at the same time, we have some gender-critical activists who do not attempt to empathize with and understand the transgender experience. So often in gender-critical circles, I'll hear comments like, yes, transgender rights matter, but, and then they'll proceed to list off a list of things that they don't want transgender people to be able to do, or be, or wear, or say. And if in that conversation I gently put forward the question of how they expect a transgender individual to find workability in the situation, the response is basically a shrug and the suggestion that they're not the one being different, so this isn't for them to figure out. So what do I do in tackling policies that will actually work? I look for inconsistencies where something is being ignored, where we are only talking about transgender people, or we are only talking about parents, or we are only talking about women. You want an example? Name and pronoun changes in schools. In most Canadian schools, this is happening completely without parental knowledge and involvement. The argument that gets used is that children might not be safe at home if they come out. They may not be able to tell their parents. We need to let them transition in school in confidence in order to protect them. And okay, I get it, I was that kid once. But when I look at this, I think we should expand it and look at the harm towards any child from any parent. See, the concern is not just about transgender children. Abuse happens outside of the transgender context. And we have a system for this that we use in literally every other case where a child may tell their teacher that they can't do something at home because they might get hurt. We involve children's aid services. These situations are tragic and they break my heart, but they're not new and they're not unique to the transgender context. See, the argument to exclude parents out of fear or abuse only holds water if you lean into transgender interests so much that it's all you can see. That a child's ability to change their name and pronouns matters more than the relationship with their parent. That the risk of abuse can be sidestepped in ways that we would never do in any other circumstances. But this is not just about trans rights activists, because the same principle goes the other way as well. Many gender-critical individuals push strongly for the abolition of gender-affirming surgeries for minors. And one of the most common surgeries done for children under 18 is the mastectomy, or the removal of the breasts. And their argument is very reasonable. It's irreversible, and there are implications to having your breasts removed. You certainly won't be able to breastfeed, and if you decide to undo your transition, you're not going to get your breasts back. And of course, there's also all of just the normal risks of any surgery. That argument in a nutshell is that gender-affirming surgeries are effectively cosmetic in nature, and there's a lot of risks. possible loss of bodily function, and possible future regret. It's a complex decision, and someone needs to be at a point in their life when they're ready to make it before they proceed. That argument makes a lot of sense, but I've also noticed something about its usage. Many of the people who bring it forward are not actually against all gender-affirming surgeries, they're just against the cross-sex ones. See, data published by the American Society of Plastic Surgeons shows that far more children who have cosmetic breast surgeries are not transgender at all. In 2020, 3,200 American girls had breast enlargements, 1,800 had breast reductions, and 2,800 American boys had the removal of breast tissue. And if we want to be consistent, we have to face the fact that these are not particularly different than a mastectomy for a trans boy or breast augmentation for a trans girl. They all carry the same surgical risks. They all have the same potential to reduce bodily function, and they all hold a risk of regret. If you tell a gender dysphoric child that they should wait for a mastectomy until they're an adult, I would honestly say, I think that's good advice. Yes, you might not feel that you can express your gender fully as you wish in your teen years, but I believe that on the balance of factors, it is worth that risk. But the same is true for non-gender dysphoric children. How can we justify why the biological female, who, say, feels that she would be more pretty or popular or comfortable or feminine, if her breasts were larger, should be permitted to move forward with augmentation surgery with parental permission and doctor's consent, of course. And yet the biological male cannot proceed with the exact same cosmetic procedure for affirmation purposes. If we are going to have policies on these things, we need to be consistent. You can't privilege transgender interests above all others, but you also can't dismiss transgender drivers and motivations as less legitimate than others either. And that, in a nutshell, is my position on the Alberta policy. And it's non-specific because my feelings are not definitive. There are elements where I know I have more to learn and where there's complexity that I haven't fully realized. I want to keep having conversations. I want to keep learning from the perspectives of others. And I want to find a balance that gets us to a place where transgender policy is not on the top of everyone's minds all the time.